Before time had a name, there was only chaos. It wasn't a storm or a war, but a silent, yawning void, a vast emptiness where nothing existed and everything waited to be born. From this infinite stillness, the first great entities emerged, not as people, but as the foundations of the universe. First came Gaia, the deep-breasted Mother Earth, solid and nurturing. Then came Tartarus, the dark pit of the underworld, and Eros, the force of desire that binds all things together. Gaia, in her solitary majesty, brought forth Uranus, the starry sky, to cover her on all sides and provide a home for the eternal gods. As Uranus stretched his blue mantle over Gaia's verdant slopes, the world began to take shape. Together, they bore the first generation of children, the 12 Titans. These were beings of immense power and beauty, representing the primal forces of nature. Among them were Oceanus, who circled the world with his waters, Rhea, the gentle mother, and Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious of them all. However, the union of earth and sky also produced more terrifying offspring. There were the 3 Cyclopes, giants with a single burning eye in the center of their foreheads, and the Hecatoncheires, monsters with 50 heads and 100 powerful arms. Uranus, looking upon these monstrous children with disgust and fear, could not bear their presence. He forced them back into the dark depths of Gaia's womb, refusing to let them see the light. This cruelty caused Gaia unbearable physical and emotional pain. Her internal groans shook the mountains as she plotted a desperate revenge against her husband's tyranny. She fashioned a great sickle made of jagged flint and called upon her Titan sons to stand against their father. Most trembled at the thought, but Cronus, driven by a thirst for dominion, stepped forward. When Uranus descended to meet Gaia under the cover of night, Cronus lay in wait. With a swift, decisive strike of the flint sickle, he overthrew his father, severing the sky's connection to the earth. As Uranus retreated into the heights, his blood spilled upon the ground, giving birth to the Furies and the giants, while the foam from his fall into the sea birthed Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Uranus, defeated but still prophetic, hissed a final warning to his son. As you have done to me, so shall your own children do to you. Cronus ignored the warning, consumed by his new status as king of the cosmos. He released his fellow Titans, but kept the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires imprisoned in Tartarus, proving himself just as cold as the father he replaced. He married his sister Rhea, and the Golden Age began, a time of peace for mortals, but one of growing tension among a divine. Cronus sat upon his throne, watching the horizon, haunted by his father's curse. He knew that to maintain his power, he would have to do the unthinkable. As the centuries drifted like mist over the new world, Rhea began to bear children of her own. She hoped for laughter to fill Mount Othries, but Cronus saw only threats. With each birth, the prophecy echoed louder in his mind. He would not be undone by his flesh and blood. Thus, he devised a gruesome plan to ensure no son or daughter would ever rise to challenge his supremacy. He would swallow them whole, trapping them within himself for all eternity. The Titan era was flourishing, yet a dark shadow was already creeping over the throne of the cosmos, threatening to consume the light. Out of the velvet silence of chaos, the first solid breath of existence took form. This was Gaia, the deep-breasted Mother Earth, who settled into the void to become the eternal foundation of all things. She was not merely a goddess. She was the soil, the stone, and the rolling hills. Beside her, other primal forces stirred. There was Tartarus, the sunless abyss that lay as deep beneath the earth as the heavens were above, and Eros, the spirit of attraction and desire, whose golden influence ensured that life would never again be static. Gaia, in her majestic solitude, began to shape the naked world. Without the need for a partner, she gave birth to Urea, the craggy mountains that reached towards the stars, and Pontus, the barren, salt-filled sea that surged with rhythmic tides. Yet the world felt incomplete. The earth required a canopy, a protective embrace to mirror her own vastness. Thus, Gaia brought forth Uranus, the starry sky, equal to herself in every measure. He draped himself over her, a shimmering cloak of indigo and silver, ensuring that every corner of the earth would have a roof and every god a home. Under the influence of Eros, the union of Gaia and Uranus became the first great marriage of the cosmos. As the sky showered the earth with fertile rains, life exploded in a symphony of green and gold. From this divine pairing came the 12 Titans, 6 sons and 6 daughters of immense power and beauty. They were the personifications of the natural world: Oceanus, the river that circled the globe; Hyperion, the light; and Rhea, the mother of future kings. For a time, the universe seemed to be moving toward a perfect golden harmony. However, the creative fires of the earth were not so easily quelled. Following the Titans, Gaia gave birth to beings of a much more terrifying nature. First came the 3 Cyclopes, one-eyed giants who possessed the skill to forge thunder and lightning. Then came the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, monstrous beings of 50 heads and unimaginable strength. While Gaia looked upon these children with a mother's fierce love, Uranus recoiled in horror. He saw them as blots upon his perfect sky, chaotic remnants of the old void that threatened his burgeoning order. In an act of cruelty that would stain the heavens forever, Uranus seized the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones, thrusting them back into the dark womb of the earth, the crushing depths of Tartarus. He refused to let them see the light, ignoring their cries and Gaia's mounting agony. Deep within her stony ribs, Gaia felt a grief that soon curdled into a cold, hard anger. The sky had become a tyrant, and the earth could no longer bear the weight of his oppression. She began to plot in the shadows of her own valleys. She reached into her internal depths and fashioned a weapon of gray flint, a jagged sickle as sharp as the betrayal she felt. Gaia whispered to her Titan children, calling for one brave enough to challenge their father and restore balance to the world. Most trembled at the thought of Uranus's wrath, but the youngest, Cronus, felt a different flame, the burning ambition to rule. The era of the primordials was ending, and a darker, more complex age was about to begin. It was a time of sharp edges and cold steel, where the innocence of the first dawn would be traded for the heavy weight of a sovereign crown.
Gaia stood as the solid anchor of the universe, but even an eternal foundation craves the touch of the infinite. In the quietude of those first eons, Gaia wished for a companion who could match her grandeur, someone to embrace her from every horizon. From her own essence, she brought forth Uranos, the starry sky. He was not a creature of soil or root, but a shimmering canopy of deep indigo and piercing light, designed to be her equal in every measure. Uranos unfolded himself across the heavens, his vast reaches touching the edges of the world, ensuring that no part of Mother Earth was left uncovered by his celestial gaze. The union of earth and sky was the first great marriage of the cosmos, a convergence that birthed the very rhythm of existence. Under the influence of Eros, who had emerged alongside them, their bond became fruitful. However, the children born of this union were not all of the same spirit. First came the 12 Titans, 6 sons and 6 daughters of magnificent stature and regal beauty. They were the personifications of the natural forces that would soon govern the world: the deep currents of the oceans, the brilliance of the sun, and the memory of time itself. Among them was young Cronos, the most ambitious and cunning of the brood, who watched his father with eyes that already shimmered with a dangerous, calculating light. Yet, as the ages turned, the children of Gaia and Uranos grew more diverse and, to the eyes of the Sky Father, more unsettling. After the Titans came the three Cyclopses, beings of immense strength with a single glowing eye set in the center of their foreheads. They were followed by the Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed ones, giants of such staggering proportions and chaotic power that the very air trembled in their presence. Each possessed 50 heads and 100 arms, representing a raw, unbridled force that Uranos found repulsive. He looked upon these monstrous offspring with a mixture of fear and loathing, seeing in their strength a potential threat to his own burgeoning dominion over the heights. Driven by a cruel vanity, Uranos refused to let these children see the light of day. One by one, as they were born, he thrust them back into the dark, stifling depths of Gaia's own body. To the sky, this was a cleansing of his realm, but to the earth it was an agonizing betrayal. Gaia groaned under the weight of her imprisoned children, their movements creating tremors that cracked her mountains and shook her valleys. The internal pressure of their captive might became a physical sorrow, a heavy, burning ache that transformed her love for Uranos into a cold, hardened resolve. Deep within the hollows of her being, Gaia began to fashion a weapon. She called out to her Titan children, her voice a low rumble that echoed through the hidden places of the world. She whispered of the injustice they suffered and the tyranny of a father who feared his own blood. While most of the Titans recoiled in horror at the thought of challenging the sky, Cronus felt a surge of destiny. He understood that the age of silent foundations was ending, and an age of struggle was about to begin. The balance of the universe was shifting, and the first seeds of rebellion were taking root in the fertile soil.
Oranos, the starry firmament, descended upon Gaia in a shimmering veil of light and wind. His vast blue expanse reached down to touch her verdant peaks, and for the first time the universe witnessed the harmony of a perfect union. As the sky lowered to meet the earth, the very air began to vibrate with the potential of life. From this celestial embrace, the world transformed from a static landscape into a nursery of divine power. The first children born of their love were the 12 Titans, 6 sons and 6 daughters, who embodied the primordial forces of the world. There was Oceanos, the river that would encircle the earth, and Tethys, who would nurture the waters. There was Hyperion, the lord of light, and Thea, who gave gold its luster. Coes brought the gift of intellect, while Phoebe whispered the mysteries of the moon. Krios, Mnemosyne, Iapetus, and Themis followed, each a pillar of the cosmic order. Finally, there was Rhea, the gentle mother, and Kronos, the youngest and most ambitious of them all. These titans were majestic and tall, their heads brushing the clouds and their footsteps shaking the mountains. Gaia watched them with a pride that warmed her stone-cold heart, seeing in them the fulfillment of her ancient longing. For a time, the universe seemed to exist in a golden equilibrium, a period of blissful growth where the sky and the earth were inseparable. The winds sang through the valleys, and the stars shimmered in newborn oceans. However, the cycle of creation did not stop with the Titans. As the eons rolled on, Gaia brought forth children of a different nature, beings of immense, untamed power that frightened even their father. First came the 3 Cyclops, Brontes, Steropes, and Argus. These were not the graceful giants their older siblings were. They were massive, rugged craftsmen with a single burning eye set in the center of their foreheads. They possessed the secret of the forge, their breath like the heat of a volcano. Following them were the Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed ones. These 3 brothers,
Cottus, Briareos, and Gyges were terrifying to behold. From their massive shoulders sprouted 50 heads and 100 powerful arms, symbols of a strength that could crush mountains into dust. Where Gaia saw beauty in the raw power of all her children, Ouranos felt only a cold, creeping dread. To him, these younger sons were aberrations, chaotic stains upon his perfect starry reign. He looked down upon their many heads and single eyes with a disgust that quickly curdled into cruelty. Ouranos, fearing their strength might one day rival his own, committed an act of unspeakable malice. He refused to let them see the light of day. One by one, he forced the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires back into the darkest depths of Gaia's womb, into the lightless, suffocating abyss of Tartarus. Gaia felt a sharp, agonizing pain ripple through her soil. It was not just the physical burden of hosting her grown children within her depths, but the emotional sting of Ouranos's betrayal. The sky, once her beloved companion, had become a jailer. Within the secret caverns of her heart, the Great Mother began to nurse a different kind of seed, a seed of vengeance. She whispered to her Titan children in the dark, looking for one who was brave enough to challenge the tyranny of the sky. The age of innocence was over, and the first war of the gods was about to begin.
As the celestial rain continued to nourish the soil, the union of Gaia and Uranos bore its most magnificent fruit. From their divine embrace, the first generation of true gods was born, the 12 Titans. These were not mere concepts like the void or the earth itself, but powerful, sentient beings who embodied the raw forces of the expanding universe. They were 6 brothers and 6 sisters, each possessing a majesty that rivaled the stars and a strength that resonated within the mountain roots. They moved with a grace the world had never seen, and their voices were like the rushing of winds and the deep rumble of the shifting earth. Among them was Oceanus, the eldest, whose spirit became the vast river that encircled the entire world, and Tethys, who would nurse the springs and fountains of the earth. There was Hyperion, the Lord of Light, and Thea, who gave brilliance to gold and silver. Mnemosyne held the emerging threads of memory, while Phoebe wore a crown of prophetic wisdom. These children were Gaia's pride, and briefly the universe existed in a state of perfect harmonious growth. The youngest was Cronus, a figure of sharp intellect and ambition, whose presence felt like the ticking of a clock not yet built. He watched his father with eyes that missed nothing, learning the secrets of the heavens. However, the harmony did not last. As the Titans grew in stature and wisdom, their power began to rival that of their father. Uranos, who had once looked upon the earth with nothing but love, began to feel a cold, biting shiver of insecurity. He was the infinite sky, the undisputed king of all he surveyed, but in the eyes of his children, he saw a future where he might no longer be the center of all things. This growing jealousy cast a long, dark shadow over the bright horizons he had created, turning his gentle reigns into occasional storms of temper. The tension deepened significantly when Gaia gave birth to subsequent sets of children who were far less symmetrical and orderly than the Titans. First came the 3 Cyclopses, beings of immense craft and strength, each possessing a single glowing eye in the center of their forehead that burned with the intensity of a forge. They were followed by the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, giants of such chaotic power and overwhelming size that the ground trembled beneath their many feet.
To Uranos, these younger children were not miracles of life, but hideous affronts to his celestial perfection. He looked upon their many limbs and singular eyes with loathing and mounting terror, unable to reconcile their wildness with his own airy nature. Gaia, the loving mother, cherished all her offspring regardless of their form. She saw the potential in her children's incredible strength. But Uranos could not see past his vanity. He worried these monstrous sons would one day topple him from his throne in the clouds. Driven by a dark impulse, the king of the sky decided the only way to ensure his safety was to hide these children. He pushed them back into the depths of the earth, forcing them into the dark, crushing weight of Gaia's womb, a place known as Tartarus. This act transformed the joy of creation into heavy pain. Gaia groaned with the weight of her imprisoned children, and for the first time, a spark of resentment flickered within the world.
While the 12 Titans were embodiments of power and beauty, the subsequent children of Gaia and Uranos were of a different, more turbulent nature. First came the 3 Cyclopes, Brontes, Steropes, and Argus. They were giants of immense strength, each possessing a single glowing eye set into the center of their forehead. They were master craftsmen, their very presence vibrating with the hum of the forge. Following them were the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones. These 3 brothers, Cottus, Briareos, and Gyges, were terrifying to behold, with 50 heads and 100 powerful arms sprouting from their massive frames. They represented the raw, chaotic forces of the earthquake and the crashing storm. Uranos, however, did not look upon these newer children with the same pride he felt for the Titans. Where the Titans were statuesque and orderly, these beings were symbols of raw, untamed power that he could not easily control. As he gazed down from his celestial heights, a cold, biting fear began to seep into his immortal heart. He feared their strength and loathed their perceived ugliness. In an act of profound cruelty, Uranos refused to let these children see the light of day. One by one, he forced them back into the darkest, deepest recesses of Gaia's body, the suffocating depths of Tartarus. The agony of this act was twofold for Gaia. Not only did she feel the physical weight of her massive children trapped within her, but her heart also burned with a mother's grief and a queen's fury. The earth groaned and trembled with her internal struggle. The love she had once felt for the sky began to wither, replaced by a cold, jagged desire for justice. She realized that the harmony of the universe had been fractured by the tyranny of its father. Deep within her stony heart, Gaia began to plot. She used her divine essence to fashion a new substance, a metal harder than any stone or wood, adamant. From this, she crafted a great curved sickle, its edge shimmering with a deadly silver light. It was a tool of harvest, but Gaia intended it for a much darker purpose. With the weapon hidden, she whispered through the caves and valleys to her Titan children. She spoke of the injustice they suffered and the cruelty of their father. "One of you must stand," she pleaded, her voice a low rumble of thunder. "One of you must end this tyranny so that your brothers may be free and the earth may breathe again." The elder Titans trembled at her harrowing words. They looked up at the vast, oppressive, and suffocating expanse of the sky and felt only a paralyzing terror. To strike at the heavens was unthinkable. It was to challenge the very ancient structure of their fragile world. But in the deep shadows of the group, the youngest Titan, Kronos, felt a different, sharper spark. He was the most ambitious of the 12, possessed of a razor-sharp mind and a heart that did not know the meaning of fear or hesitation. While his older siblings looked away in shame, Kronos stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with a cold, unnatural metallic light. He reached out his trembling hand and took the heavy adamant sickle from his mother's grasp. "I will do it," he whispered fiercely,
And at that precise moment, the fate of the entire universe shifted. The era of the sky was nearing its violent, inevitable end, and the glorious age of the Titans was about to begin in blood.
Aranos, once a lover of beauty, was repulsed by his latest offspring. Where he saw the Titans as reflections of his own celestial splendor, he viewed the three Cyclopes and the three Hecatoncheires as unforgivable stains upon the canvas of creation. To the Sky Father, their thunderous strength was a threat, and their chaotic forms were an insult to the perfect, serene order he wished to maintain. He could not bear to look upon their singular, bulging eyes, or the whirlwind of their 50 flailing heads. In a fit of divine vanity and growing fear, Adanos committed an act of unimaginable cruelty. One by one, he seized these powerful children and thrust them back into the dark, crushing depths of the earth, sealing them away in the lightless prison of Tartarus. Gaia felt a pain that no mountain or valley could contain. It was not merely the physical weight of her imprisoned sons that tormented her, though their restless thrashing deep within her crust caused the very foundations of the world to groan. It was the agonizing betrayal of a mother's heart. She had loved the sky, but now she saw him as a tyrant who discarded life simply because it did not meet his rigid, unyielding ideals. Her grief soon crystallized into a sharp, cold fury. She realized that the harmony of the universe had been shattered by the hand of its protector, and the only way to heal the world was to sever the tie that bound the earth to the sky. In the secret, shadowed places of her being, Gaia began to toil. She reached deep into her veins, pulling forth a new material, gray flint, a stone harder and sharper than any that had come before. With meticulous care and vengeful intent, she fashioned this flint into a jagged, curved sickle, its edge gleaming with the dark, sharp promise of change. Once the weapon was complete, Gaia gathered her 12 Titan children. She spoke to them in a voice like the shifting of tectonic plates, her words heavy with the burden of her sorrow. She pleaded for one of them to rise against their father and liberate their brothers from the abyss. The Titans, majestic as they were, trembled. They looked up at the vast, suffocating expanse of Adanos and felt the weight of his authority. They feared his wrath and the power of the heavens. A heavy silence fell over the gathering of divine beings, broken only by the muffled cries of the monsters trapped below. But then, from the back of the group, the youngest and most cunning Titan stepped forward. This was Cronus, a god whose ambition was as sharp as the blade his mother held. Unlike his siblings, Cronus did not look at the sky with reverence, but with a calculated hunger for his father's throne. "I will do it, mother," Cronus declared, his voice cold and steady. He reached out and took the flint sickle from Gaia's hand. The cold stone seemed to hum in his grip, sensing the monumental task ahead. Gaia's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and dread. She instructed Cronus to hide in a secluded, mist-choked valley and wait for the moment when the sky would descend to embrace the earth. The stage was set for a confrontation that would forever alter the hierarchy of existence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the air grew still, and the world held its breath, waiting for the first violent and necessary rebellion against the celestial order.
Auranos did not just hide his children away. He committed an act of cosmic cruelty that would resonate through the ages. Fearing their chaotic strength and loathing their unconventional appearance, he forced the 3 Hecatoncheires and the 3 Cyclopes back into the dark, stifling depths of the earth, deep within Gaia's own body. This place, a suffocating abyss of shadow known as Tartarus, became a hollow, aching prison for her innocent sons. To Oranos, the problem was solved, and he returned to his celestial throne, pleased with the hollow order he had restored. But for Gaia, the Sky Father's vanity became a physical and spiritual agony that could no longer be endured. The presence of her massive, struggling children trapped within her caused a pressure so intense it felt as though her very foundations might shatter under the immense strain. The Mother Earth, who had once looked upon the sky with longing and love, now looked upward with a heart hardened by a cold, simmering resentment. She was the cradle of life, yet her husband had turned her into a living tomb for her own offspring. The silent, yawning void of chaos had been a place of infinite potential, but this new silence, the silence of Uranus's indifference, was a place of brewing war. Gaia knew that the delicate balance of the universe had been tilted too far toward tyranny. The Sky Father had become a dictator of the heavens, and the earth would no longer remain a passive, silent observer to his arrogance. Within the fiery, molten core of her being, she began to forge a desperate plan, manifesting her grief into a physical weapon of truly unimaginable power. She reached into her own metallic veins, pulling forth the hardest of all substances, gray flint, or as some ancient stories say, indestructible adamantine. Deep in the subterranean forges of her spirit, she shaped this metal into a jagged, curved blade, a sickle that shimmered with a cold, unforgiving light. It was traditionally a tool of the harvest, but Gaia intended to harvest more than just the golden fruits of the soil. She intended to harvest the very rain of the sky itself. With the weapon hidden carefully beneath the folds of her rolling hills, she summoned her firstborn children, the 12 Titans, to a secret, hushed council. She revealed the jagged blade and spoke with a voice that shook the roots of the world, asking which of them was brave enough to challenge their father's cruelty and restore the balance. The Titans, majestic and powerful as they were, trembled at the terrifying suggestion. Uranus was the sky, vast and all-seeing, and his wrath was a storm they were not prepared to face. They looked at the ground, their divine voices falling silent in fear, until the youngest of them finally stepped forward. This was Kronos, the most ambitious and cunning of the 12. Unlike his siblings, Kronos did not merely fear the height of the sky, he secretly craved it for himself. He reached out and grasped the cold handle of the adamantine sickle, his eyes reflecting the sharp edge of his mother's grim resolve. He promised Gaia that he would do what was necessary to claim the throne and end the Sky Father's reign forever. The plan was set. When Uranus descended that night to embrace the earth, he would find not a lover's welcome, but the biting edge of betrayal. The age of innocent creation was ending, replaced by the sharp, cold reality of power.
Gaia's resentment was a coal fire that burned through the deep strata of her being. She could no longer endure the muffled cries of her imprisoned sons echoing in the hollows of her chest. With a resolve as hard as the ancient mountains, the Earth Mother reached into her hidden veins of metal and drew forth a substance never before seen, gray adamant. In the silence of the deep earth, she hammered and shaped it, forging a great curved blade, a sickle that shimmered with a deadly, unnatural light. It was the first weapon ever created, a jagged crescent designed to sever the bond between the earth and the sky forever. Holding the cold tool, Gaia gathered her 12 Titan children in the shadows of her vast valleys. Her voice was a low, rhythmic rumble that shook the foundations of the world. "My children," she whispered, her words heavy with the weight of her suffering. "Your father has committed an atrocity by burying your brothers in the darkness. He is the first to devise such shameful acts. Who among you has the courage to stand against his cruelty? Who will help me deliver justice and end this tyranny?" A heavy silence fell over the Titans.
they looked up at the vast, shimmering expanse of Uranus, their father, whose power seemed absolute and whose reach was infinite. Fear, thick and suffocating, gripped their hearts. To strike at the sky was to strike at the very order of the world they inhabited. They remained still, their eyes cast downward, until a voice cut through the oppressive stillness. It was the youngest and most cunning of them all, Kronos. "I will do it, mother," Kronos declared, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of terrifying ambition and cold defiance. "I feel no love for a father who hides his own flesh and blood in the pits of the earth. Give me the blade, and I will ensure he never exerts such cruel power again." Gaia felt a surge of grim satisfaction. She handed the sharp adamant sickle to Kronos and whispered a plan born of ancient sorrow and tactical betrayal. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world transitioned into a soft purple twilight, Uranus descended from the heights. He came as he always did, draped in a velvet mantle of night, seeking to spread himself over Gaia in a possessive embrace. He suspected nothing, for he believed himself the unchallenged master of all existence. As the Sky Father settled upon the earth, Kronos, who had been hidden in a deep shadowed crevice of his mother's body, sprang from his concealment. With a roar that fractured the silence of the primordial evening, he swung the jagged sickle with all the divine might he possessed. The blade bit deep into the celestial form of Uranus, severing his power in a single catastrophic stroke. A scream of agony tore through the atmosphere, a sound so terrible that the stars themselves trembled in their distant orbits. Blood, hot and divine, spilled from the wound, raining down upon Gaia's soil like a morbid harvest. Where the droplets touched the earth, new and vengeful life began to stir. The Furies, the Giants, and Amelia nymphs, born from the violent separation of the first lovers. Uranus, broken and defeated, retreated high into the heavens, vowing that his children would one day face a similar fate. The era of the sky was over. The era of Kronos had begun, but the victory was stained with a darkness that would haunt the gods for eternity.
Gaia แพ้ต้องถล่มสบันสัมพิลักอัลลอฮ์ its edge glowing with the cold pale light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own aching heart. She called her Titan children together in the hidden echoing depths of her being, her voice a low mournful rumble that shook the very roots of the ancient mountains. "My children," she pleaded, her eyes reflecting the jagged metal, "your father has committed a grave injustice that can no longer be ignored. He has buried your brothers, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, in the lightless darkness of the pit. Who among you is brave enough to strike back? Who will free us from this eternal cruelty?" The Titans stood in a wide, trembling circle, their faces etched with uncertainty and the flickering shadows of the deep earth. They feared the immense suffocating power of their father, the sky, whose reach was infinite and whose temper was as vast as the horizon. Oceanus hesitated, his watery heart cooling with caution, and Iapetus looked away, unable to meet his mother's desperate gaze. But then, a voice like the slow grinding of tectonic plates broke the heavy silence. Cronus, the youngest and most cunning of the 12, stepped forward into the pale light. His eyes burned with a secret, simmering hunger for power that rivaled the heat of the first stars. "Mother," he declared, his strong hand reaching for the weapon, "I will do what must be done. I do not fear the one who calls himself our father, for his tyranny has made him weak." As the golden hues of twilight faded into the deep velvet indigo of night, Uranus descended from his celestial heights. He came as he always did, draped in a majestic cloak of stars, seeking to cover Gaia in his vast possessive embrace. He did not sense the sudden, unnatural trembling of the earth beneath him, nor did he see the shadow lurking within the jagged folds of the mountain pass. Cronus lay in wait, the flint sickle gripped tightly in his steady hand, his breath held in a stillness of the dark.
The air grew heavy and silent, the very wind ceasing its whisper as the two primordial forces of existence prepared to meet. Just as Uranos reached out to claim the earth, Cronus lunged from his hiding place with the ferocity of a trapped predator. With a single swift stroke, the flint blade sliced through the air, severing the connection between the sky and the earth forever. A terrible, thunderous cry erupted from Uranos, a sound of such visceral agony that it tore through the fabric of the young universe. His divine blood spilled upon Gaia like a golden rain, and where it touched his soil, new and strange beings began to stir from the loam. The Erinyes, the towering giants, and the ash tree nymphs were born in that violent instant, proof that even in destruction, the world remained fertile. The age of Uranos had ended in a flash of silver and a roar of celestial pain. As the Sky Father retreated into the cold, distant heavens, he looked down at his son with a gaze of pure, icy resentment, forever distanced from the world he once dominated. Cronus stood tall upon the highest peak, the sickle still dripping with the essence of the stars. He was now the king of the Titans, the master of a new, golden era. Yet, as he gazed up at the retreating sky, a small, cold seed of the same fear he had just exploited began to take root in his own immortal heart.